What if the most powerful tools for psychological transformation weren't created by modern science at all, but were encoded thousands of years ago in ancient wisdom that's been hidden in plain sight? Today, we journey beyond the veil to discover how the Seven Hermetic Principles, ancient keys to understanding reality itself, can unlock unprecedented depths of psychological healing and personal evolution that modern therapy barely touches. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the most profound answers to our modern psychological struggles come not from the latest research papers or therapeutic techniques, but from wisdom so ancient it feels as though it speaks directly to the soul? There's a reason for this paradox, a hidden connection between the fabric of your mind and the cosmic order that the ancient sages understood all too well. I invite you, not as a casual viewer, but as a fellow traveler on the path of awakening, to step with me through a doorway that few in our modern world even know exists. The Hermetic tradition, preserved through millennia by mystery schools and passed down through initiates, contains a set of principles so profound that when properly understood, they don't just describe reality, they provide the very framework for transforming it, beginning with your own consciousness. What I'm about to share isn't just information. It's a transmission of knowledge that has the potential to fundamentally alter how you understand yourself and your place in the cosmos. The Seven Hermetic Principles from the legendary Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus aren't just philosophical concepts, they are living keys that, when applied with intention, unlock chambers of your psyche that modern psychology has only begun to glimpse. In the next 30 minutes, I will guide you through an exploration of how these seven hermetic keys can be applied as powerful tools for psychological transformation. But understand this, what you're about to receive isn't merely another self-help approach. This is ancient wisdom that speaks to the very architecture of reality, offering insights that transcend the typical boundaries between the spiritual and psychological realms. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without, isn't just a poetic phrase, it's a profound recognition of correspondence that explains why internal psychological work creates external change. This principle reveals why shadow integration is so powerful, why thought patterns shape your reality, and how the vibrational nature of consciousness determines what manifests in your life. What the ancient Hermeticists understood, and what modern psychology is only now rediscovering, is that consciousness itself is the primary substance of reality. When we work with these principles, we aren't just changing our thoughts, we're realigning our entire being with the fundamental laws that govern existence itself. The promise before you is this: through understanding and applying these seven ancient keys, you can unlock a level of psychological transformation that goes beyond symptom management or behavioral modification. You can fundamentally transmute the very substance of your being, turning the lead of limiting beliefs, emotional wounds, and unconscious patterns into the gold of expanded awareness, authentic power, and profound inner peace. Our exploration today will guide you through each of the seven Hermetic Principles, unveiling their psychological applications and providing practical techniques for applying them in your own inner work. We'll move from understanding the mental nature of the universe to exploring how polarity and rhythm shape our emotional experiences, and finally to how causality and gender can be leveraged for genuine transformation. Along this journey, you'll discover how the principle of mentalism connects to modern understanding of cognitive restructuring and the creation of your psychological reality, why correspondence explains the power of shadow work and provides a framework for healing at multiple levels simultaneously, how vibration helps us understand emotional states as frequencies that can be intentionally shifted, The way polarity reveals the hidden unity behind psychological opposites and offers a path to transcending inner conflict. How rhythm governs the natural cycles of psychological growth and can be harnessed rather than resisted. Why understanding cause and effect liberates us from victim consciousness and empowers genuine change. How gender, as a universal principle of creation, provides a template for psychological wholeness and creative manifestation. For each principle, I'll offer not just philosophical understanding, but concrete visualization practices and integration techniques that you can begin applying immediately in your own psychological journey. To truly grasp the transformative power of these principles, we must first understand their origins. The Hermetic tradition is named after the legendary figure Hermes Trismegistus, considered by many scholars to be a syncretic combination of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth, both deities of wisdom, writing, and magic. The Emerald Tablet, attributed to this figure, contains the essence of Hermetic philosophy distilled into profound axioms. The phrase, "as above, so below," from this tablet has become one of the most recognized Hermetic maxims, embodying the principle of correspondence that reveals the interconnectedness between different planes of existence. This principle suggests that patterns observed in one domain mirror those in another, creating a harmony spanning both cosmos and consciousness. These teachings were preserved through the ages in mystery schools across Egypt, Greece, and later Europe, influencing traditions from Neoplatonism and Gnosticism to Jewish Kabbalah and Muslim Sufism. The Renaissance saw a revival of interest in Hermetic wisdom, with alchemists and philosophers studying these principles as guides to both spiritual and material transformation. In 1908, the Kybalion was published, offering a modern interpretation of these ancient teachings through 7 fundamental principles. This text became a significant source for understanding Hermetic thinking and has guided many seekers of esoteric knowledge. What makes these principles so remarkable is not just their antiquity, but their perennial relevance. The same wisdom that guided alchemists in their laboratories now offers profound insights for our psychological understanding. Carl Jung himself was deeply influenced by Hermetic philosophy, particularly in his concepts of the collective unconscious and the individuation process. The universal appeal of Hermetic wisdom comes from its ability to transcend dogma while embracing direct experiential knowledge of divine principles, what the ancients called gnosis. These aren't simply beliefs to be accepted, but truths to be experienced directly through one's own consciousness. The all is mind. The universe is mental. This first Hermetic principle establishes the foundation for all psychological work by recognizing that consciousness is primary. Rather than being a byproduct of physical processes, mind is understood as the fundamental reality from which all else emerges. In practical psychological terms, this principle aligns perfectly with cognitive restructuring, which recognizes that our thoughts shape our emotional and behavioral reality. When you change your thoughts, you change your experience, not because you're ignoring reality, but because you're working with the mental substance from which reality is constructed. Close your eyes and imagine entering a vast laboratory of mind. See yourself standing before a workbench where your thoughts take form as tangible substances. Notice how different qualities of thoughts create different energetic patterns. Observe how limiting beliefs appear dense and heavy, while expansive thoughts shimmer with light and possibility. Now, consciously select one persistent negative thought pattern you wish to transform. See it clearly before you as a substance that can be worked with. Using your imagination as an alchemical tool, visualize this thought being dissolved, reformed, and transmuted into a more empowering pattern. Feel this new thought pattern integrating into your consciousness, creating new neural pathways and possibilities. This practice isn't mere fantasy. It's working directly with the mental substance of your reality, engaging the principle that the universe is fundamentally mental in nature. Modern neuroscience confirms that mental rehearsal creates real changes in neural architecture. As above, so below. As below, so above. This principle reveals that patterns repeat across different scales and planes of existence. The macrocosm is reflected in the microcosm, creating a framework for understanding how inner psychological work manifests in outer reality. This principle provides the theoretical foundation for shadow integration work. When Jung noted that whatever qualities a man does not recognize in himself, shadow, anima, whatever, will confront him in real life, he was essentially restating the Hermetic principle of correspondence. The outer world becomes a mirror for what remains unconscious within us. For 1 week, approach every triggering interaction as a mirror reflecting something within your own psyche. When someone irritates you deeply, ask, what aspect of myself might this person be reflecting that I haven't fully acknowledged? Record your observations in a journal, noting patterns that emerge. This isn't about blaming yourself for others' behaviors, but about recognizing the profound correspondence between your inner landscape and your outer experiences. This practice transforms relationships from sources of frustration into opportunities for profound self-knowledge. As you integrate previously unconscious aspects of yourself, you'll notice your external reality shifting in response, not through magical thinking, but through the natural operation of the principle of correspondence. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This principle recognizes that all things exist as vibrational states along a continuum, from the densest matter to the most subtle thoughts. In psychological terms, this explains how emotions and mental states operate as frequencies that can be intentionally shifted. This vibrational understanding aligns with transpersonal psychology's recognition that consciousness exists on multiple levels or states, each with its own characteristics and qualities. By consciously working with vibration, we can access expanded states of awareness beyond our ordinary experience. Begin by becoming aware of your current emotional frequency. Without judgment, simply notice the quality of energy moving through your body and mind. Is it heavy or light? Contracted or expansive? Turbulent or peaceful? Now, bring to mind a higher emotional state you wish to embody. Perhaps joy, peace, or compassionate strength. Rather than forcing the state, tune into its unique vibrational signature, like finding a radio frequency. Feel the subtle resonance of this emotion in your body. Gradually allow your awareness to align with this frequency, letting go of resistance. Just as a tuning fork causes another to vibrate at the same frequency when brought near it, your consciousness naturally attunes to the vibrational states you hold in sustained awareness. Practice this daily, recognizing that you're not just changing thoughts, but actually shifting the vibrational frequency of your consciousness in ways that affect your entire being. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. This principle reveals that apparent opposites are actually extremes of the same thing, differing only in degree. Psychologically, this explains how emotional and mental states that seem opposed, like love and hate, are actually points on a single spectrum. Understanding this allows for the transmutation of negative states into positive ones by shifting gradually along the spectrum rather than trying to leap from one pole to its opposite. This principle aligns perfectly with cognitive restructuring techniques, which recognize that thoughts exist on continuums rather than absolutes. By recognizing the unity behind apparent opposites, we can dissolve black and white thinking and access more nuanced, reality-based perspectives. Identify an emotional or psychological polarity that causes you struggle. Perhaps confidence and insecurity, attachment and detachment, or certainty and uncertainty. Visualize this polarity as a spectrum of light, with one extreme as red and the opposite as violet. See how these colors blend into a complete rainbow in between, revealing that the seeming opposites are actually connected through gradual shifts. Now imagine yourself having the freedom to move anywhere along this spectrum, rather than being stuck at one extreme. Feel how this movement represents psychological flexibility rather than rigidity. This practice transforms rigid either-or thinking into a more fluid understanding that embraces the full spectrum of human experience. Everything flows, out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This principle acknowledges that all things move in cycles, including our psychological states. Rather than fighting these natural rhythms, we can learn to work with them, understanding that periods of growth are often followed by integration, and challenges eventually yield to ease. Psychologically, this explains why progress isn't linear and helps us navigate the inevitable ebbs and flows of mental and emotional states without becoming discouraged. By recognizing these rhythms, we can develop greater patience and trust in the process of transformation. For 1 month, keep a daily record of your psychological states, noting energy levels, emotional tone, and mental clarity. Look for patterns in these cycles, perhaps weekly rhythms tied to work schedules, monthly patterns connected to biological cycles, or seasonal shifts in mood and motivation. Once you've identified your natural rhythms, work with them rather than against them. Plan demanding activities during high-energy periods and reflective or restorative practices during natural ebbs. This isn't about surrendering to limitations, but about strategically using natural cycles to your advantage. The wisdom of rhythm teaches us that the pendulum always swings, but its anchor point, the center from which it swings, remains stable. By identifying with this center rather than with the extremes, you can maintain equilibrium amid life's inevitable fluctuations. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. This principle establishes that nothing happens by chance, and that all events follow lawful patterns, even when those patterns aren't immediately apparent. Psychologically, this principle liberates us from victim consciousness by revealing that we participate in creating our experiences through our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. By understanding the causal chains operating in our lives, we gain the power to initiate new causes that will produce different effects. This principle doesn't blame people for circumstances beyond their control, but it does recognize our agency in responding to those circumstances in ways that either perpetuate or transform them. Select a recurring pattern in your life that you wish to change. On paper, trace this pattern backward through the chain of causes and effects that produce it. Begin with the immediate causes, actions, choices, responses, and work back to more subtle causes, beliefs, expectations, unconscious patterns. Once you've mapped this causal chain, identify points where you can intervene to create different outcomes. These intervention points are your leverage for change. Rather than trying to change the end result directly, focus on initiating new causes that will naturally produce different effects. For example, if you struggle with abandonment in relationships, you might trace the chain back through your behaviors, the partners you choose, your expectations, and ultimately to core beliefs formed in early experiences. By changing these causal factors, rather than just trying not to be abandoned, you create lasting transformation. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This principle recognizes that creative processes require the interaction of complementary energies, traditionally described as masculine, active, projective, and feminine, receptive, nurturing. Psychologically, this explains the importance of integrating different aspects of consciousness for wholeness. Jung's concepts of anima and animus, the contrasexual archetypes within the psyche, directly parallel this Hermetic understanding. True psychological health comes from honoring and integrating both the active and receptive aspects of consciousness, rather than over-identifying with one at the expense of the other. Begin by identifying which gender principle you tend to overemphasize in your approach to psychological growth. Do you primarily focus on active doing, analyzing, and controlling, masculine principle? Or do you emphasize receiving, nurturing, and allowing, feminine principle? Create a daily practice that intentionally cultivates the complementary energy. If you're predominantly in masculine mode, practice receptive meditation, intuitive listening, and allowing change to unfold organically. If you're predominantly in feminine mode, practice setting clear intentions, establishing boundaries, and taking decisive action. This balance creates psychological wholeness and enhances creative manifestation by engaging the full spectrum of your consciousness. In our modern world, psychology often stops at the boundaries of the individual mind. But Hermetic wisdom, like transpersonal psychology, recognizes that consciousness extends far beyond personal identity into collective and cosmic dimensions. The Seven Hermetic Principles don't just apply to individual healing. They provide a framework for understanding collective transformation and our participation in larger fields of consciousness. As we align our individual minds with these universal principles, we become conscious agents in the evolution of consciousness itself. This perspective transforms psychological work from mere self-improvement into sacred participation with cosmic processes. We recognize that personal healing contributes to collective healing through the principle of correspondence, and that our individual vibration affects the greater field through sympathetic resonance. The ultimate goal of Hermetic psychology isn't just the healthy functioning of the ego, but what the ancients called the great work. The soul's reunion with its divine source through a progressive awakening. This alchemical process transforms not just specific issues, but our fundamental relationship with existence. As we conclude our exploration of these 7 ancient keys to psychological transformation, I invite you to recognize that this is not merely information to be understood intellectually, but wisdom to be embodied through practice. The Hermetic path has always been experiential, focusing on direct realization rather than secondhand knowledge. Begin by choosing one principle that resonates most strongly with your current life situation. Work with the corresponding practice daily for at least one lunar cycle, noting how your consciousness shifts in response. Then gradually incorporate the other principles, building a comprehensive practice of Hermetic psychology. Remember that you're not just working with modern concepts, but engaging with an ageless tradition that has guided seekers for millennia. As you apply these principles, you join a lineage of those who have used this wisdom to transform lead into gold, both metaphorically in the laboratory of consciousness and literally in the quality of their lived experience. For those who wish to continue this exploration, I invite you to join our community of modern mystics as we journey beyond the veil together. Share your insights and experiences in the comments below, and subscribe to join us next week as we explore the hidden connections between quantum physics and Hermetic principles. Until then, remember the words inscribed on the emerald tablet: true without falsehood, certain and most true. May your inner work be guided by this same clarity and truth.